In the quiet corners of our lives, where shadows dance and doubts whisper, we've all faced moments that test the very fabric of our being. Moments where the path forward is obscured by a fog so thick, it feels like the sun has forgotten how to shine. Today, we delve into a story that begins in such a place. A story of a woman named Alara, who stood at the edge of a silent abyss, believing all hope was lost. But what she didn't know was that a single, almost imperceptible choice was about to change everything. Alara's world had once been a vibrant tapestry of dreams and laughter. She was a gifted artist, her canvases bursting with color, her sculptures breathing life into cold clay. She saw beauty everywhere, in the blush of a dawn sky, in the intricate patterns of a fallen leaf, in the joyful chaos of a bustling market. Her studio, filled with the scent of turpentine and damp earth, was her sanctuary, a place where her soul could speak freely. She was in love, a deep, resonant love with a man who seemed to understand the silent language of her heart. Their life together was a melee, each note more beautiful than the last. They planned a future painted with the same bright hues she used on her canvas: a cottage, a garden, a life filled with shared creation. But life, in its unpredictable nature, can be a cruel editor. The melody fractured. The vibrant colors began to fade into muted grays. It started subtly, a criticism here, a dismissal there. Her art, once celebrated, was now deemed a frivolous hobby. Her dreams, once shared, were now called childish fantasies. The man she loved began to construct invisible walls around her, brick by brick, until her world shrank to the size of his approval. The laughter in their home was replaced by a tense silence, punctuated by the sharp sting of his words. He didn't raise a hand, but his voice became a cage, chipping away at her confidence, her identity, her very sense of self. Her studio gathered dust. The canvases stood blank, their white surfaces mocking her with the memory of what used to be. The clay hardened, untouched. The woman who once saw beauty in everything could now only see her own reflection as a failure, a disappointment. The fog had rolled in, not from the outside, but from within her own home, and it was suffocating. She became a ghost in her own life, moving through the motions, her spirit dimming with each passing day. Her friends' calls went unanswered, their concerned messages read and ignored. How could she explain that she was trapped in a prison with no bars, held captive by a love that had turned to poison? Hope wasn't just lost. It felt like a foolish myth she had once believed in. One rain-swept afternoon, as she stared out the window at the weeping sky, a memory surfaced. It was a small, almost forgotten moment from her childhood. She was 7, trying to build a towering sandcastle. Wave after wave came, relentlessly washing her work away. She had collapsed in tears, frustrated and defeated. Her grandmother had sat beside her, not to help rebuild, but to simply watch the ocean. "The sea is powerful, my love," she had said, her voice calm and steady. "You cannot stop the waves, but you can choose to move your castle further up the shore, or you can choose to dance in the water. The sea doesn't control your joy, Alara. You do." The memory struck her with the force of a physical blow. The sea, the relentless waves. For years, she had been trying to hold back a tide that was determined to destroy her. She had been sitting on the sand, weeping, as everything she built was washed away. Her grandmother's words echoed across the decades, a lighthouse beam cutting through her personal fog. "The sea doesn't control your joy. You do." In that instant, a flicker, a tiny, defiant spark in the overwhelming darkness. The choice. It had always been there, buried beneath layers of fear and despair. The choice wasn't to stop the waves. The choice was to move. That night, she didn't sleep. The house was quiet, her captor asleep in the other room. With trembling hands, she walked into her dusty studio. She ran a finger over a hardened block of clay. It was cold and unforgiving, just like her life had become. But as she stood there, the spark within her grew. It wasn't a roaring fire, not yet. It was a pilot light, small but persistent. The choice wasn't about a grand escape plan. It was smaller. It was about one single act of defiance, one step back towards herself. She picked up a piece of charcoal. Her hand shook, the force of the act startling. For the first time in years, she wasn't creating for praise, for approval, or for sale. She was creating for her own survival. She began to draw on a blank canvas. She didn't draw a flower or a landscape. She drew the cage. She drew the sharp, cutting words as shards of glass. She drew the silence as a heavy, suffocating blanket. She drew her own face, pale and distant, with eyes that had forgotten how to see color. She drew until her fingers were black with charcoal, until tears mixed with the dust on her cheeks, until the sun began to hint at a new day. When she was done, she stood back and looked at the canvas. It was raw, painful, and brutally honest. And it was the most beautiful thing she had ever created, because it was the truth. In giving form to her pain, she had separated it from herself. It was there, on the canvas, no longer just an invisible poison in her veins. This single act of creation was the one choice. It was the choice to acknowledge her reality, to reclaim her voice, even if only to herself. It was the moment she stopped letting the waves wash over her and decided to take a step up the shore. This one act cracked the foundation of her prison. The next day, she felt a shift. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was no longer all-encompassing. Alongside it was a sliver of something new, resolve. She went online and found a local art class, a simple pottery workshop. Signing up felt like a revolution. When she told him she was going, his disapproval was a physical force. But this time, his words didn't shatter her. They bounced off the newfound armor she had forged in charcoal and truth. She simply said, "I'm going," and she walked out the door. The pottery studio was a revelation. The scent of damp clay, the hum of the wheels, the quiet concentration of strangers creating side by side. It was a homecoming. As she centered the clay on the wheel, she felt herself centering her own spirit. With every pull, every shape she formed, she was rebuilding not just a pot, but herself. She was messy. Her first few creations collapsed, but she wasn't discouraged. She laughed, a sound that felt rusty and unfamiliar, and started again. She was no longer a ghost. She was a creator. She was Elara. That small choice to pick up the charcoal led to another, and another. The art class led to reconnecting with an old friend. A coffee with that friend led to a long, honest conversation. Sharing her story out loud, hearing it reflected in her friend's compassionate eyes, stripped it of its power over her. The shame began to dissolve, not all at once, but one box at a time. Each object she packed was a promise to her future self. Her art supplies, her favorite books, the photograph of her grandmother. The day she left was quiet. There was no dramatic confrontation. She simply loaded the last box into her friend's car and drove away. As she looked in the rearview mirror, she saw the house shrink, becoming just another building on just another street. The cage, which had once been her entire world, was now just a memory. She was free, not because someone had rescued her, but because she had made a choice to rescue herself. The journey wasn't over. Healing is not a straight line. There were days of doubt, moments of grief for the love she thought she had. But now, she had her tools. When the waves of sadness came, she didn't let them pull her under. She went to her new, small studio, and she painted them. She sculpted them. She turned her pain into art, her struggle into beauty. Her canvases exploded with color again, but it was a different kind of color now, deeper, richer, tempered by the shadows she had walked through. Her story reminds us of a profound truth. Even in our darkest hour, when hope feels like a distant memory, we possess an incredible power. The power of choice. It may not be a choice to change our circumstances overnight. It may be a choice as small as picking up a piece of charcoal, making a phone call, or taking one single step in a new direction. That one choice is a declaration. It is you, telling the universe and yourself, "I am still here. My story is not over." It is the seed from which a new life can grow. Elara's freedom didn't come from a dramatic escape. It came from the quiet, courageous decision to reclaim one small piece of herself. And in doing so, she reclaimed it all. So, if you find yourself lost in the fog, standing before your own silent abyss, remember Elara. Look for the one small choice you can make today. Not for anyone else, but for you. It is the first echo of your own greatness, calling you home. Thank you for joining us on Echoes of Greatness. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue to share stories that inspire and uplift. Until next time, be kind to yourself and listen for the echoes.